Let's begin by learning about the basic parts of your machine. The carry handle is here. This makes it very easy to transport your machine. This is the pattern selector dial. Turn this to choose the stitch you want, as well as to select the buttonhole. This is the stitch length dial. It allows you to adjust the distance between the stitches. This is the removable extension table, which provides a flat surface for sewing. However, it can be removed from the machine, providing access to the free arm. This is great when sewing tubular areas like pants hems or small items like children's clothing or craft projects. The extension table provides storage for your machine's accessories. The thread tension dial is located here. For most of your sewing, you can just leave it set in this range. However, it can be altered as much as you want for different sewing techniques like basting or gathering. At the back of the machine is your presser foot lifter. Lift this to remove fabric from under the presser foot when finished sewing, or to place fabric under the foot to begin sewing. This is your foot controller. The rest of your machine's parts will be explained as they are used throughout this program. There are seam guide lines on the needle plate to help you guide the edge of your fabric depending on how much seam allowance you want. To begin sewing, place your fabric under the presser foot, then lower the presser foot. Step on the foot controller and sew a few stitches. Press down on the reverse lever located here at the front of the machine to sew a few reverse stitches. This will secure the seam to keep the stitches from coming undone. Release the reverse lever and the machine will sew forward again. Do the same procedure to finish a seam. To remove your sewing from the machine, turn the hand wheel toward you until the take-up lever is in its highest position. Then continue turning it toward you until the needle just slightly begins to go down again. This will ensure that your threads will not tangle or jam when you begin sewing again. Raise the presser foot and then remove your work from the machine. To trim the thread ends, pull the threads behind the presser foot. Guide them around the side of the machine and then into the thread cutter. By using the thread cutter, the thread tails will be trimmed long enough so that the machine doesn't come unthreaded when you start to sew again. This is the presser foot pressure control. Pressure is the force the presser foot exerts on the fabric when it is being stitched. Pressure is important because it influences the straightness of seams, the uniformity of the stitch length, and the even handling of both layers of fabric. The presser foot pressure of the machine has been preset and doesn't require any special readjusting for most fabrics. However, for very thin fabrics, the presser foot pressure should be loosened by turning the screw counterclockwise. For heavy fabrics, like sewing on denim or canvas, tighten the presser foot pressure by turning the dial clockwise. Your machine has a variety of basic sewing stitches from which to choose. This is the pattern selector dial. It can be turned either toward the left or to the right to select a stitch. Always be sure that your needle is in the highest position when turning the pattern selector dial. There is a straight stitch in center position, a straight stitch in right position, a zigzag in varying degrees of width, a multiple stitch zigzag, a stretch blind hem, a regular blind hem, and 2 decorative stitches. After selecting the stitch you want, you can adjust the stitch length for your project using the stitch length dial. The stitch length dial makes your stitches sew closer together or further apart. You will notice that the straight stitch has 2 settings, one for center needle position and one for the right needle position. You can use either one for your regular sewing. For most of your sewing, you can use the center needle position. Now turn the pattern selector dial to the zigzag setting. The width of the zigzag stitch will change as the dial is turned. To make the zigzag stitches narrower, set the pattern selector dial like this. To make the zigzag stitches wider, set the pattern selector dial like this. There are 2 styles of blind hem stitch. One is for stretch fabrics and the other is for woven fabrics. Generally, the stitch length should be set for a longer stitch setting. To make a blind hem, first turn the hem up to the depth you want, then press. Finish the raw edge of the fabric with a zigzag stitch or trim with pinking shears. Pin the hem in place. Fold the fabric back like this so that it is against the right side of the fabric with the top edge of the hem extending about 1/4 inch to the right side of the folded fabric. Start sewing slowly at the fold, making sure that the needle slightly touches the top fold, catching 1 or 2 fabric threads. When finished sewing, unfold the fabric and then press. The multi-stitch zigzag can be used for darning, mending, applying elastic, and even for attaching trims. For elastic insertion, place the elastic through the hole of the presser foot, extending it out toward the back. Place the fabric under the foot. Lower the presser foot. Begin sewing, stretching the elastic as you sew. For darning, place a reinforcement fabric on the back side of the tear to stabilize. Sew over the center of the tear. Now stitch again along each side of the tear to secure. For mending, place a patch in position over the hole in the fabric. Stitch around the patch until it has been securely attached. Use a shorter stitch length if you want the stitches closer together. To attach a trim, just place the trim under the presser foot and begin stitching in place on the fabric. Your machine also has two decorative stitches, a shell stitch and a crescent stitch. The shell stitch can be used on fabrics like tricot or shears to create a shell effect at the edge. To do this, fold the fabric under, then stitch the fabric right at the edge. When finished, trim any excess fabric away from the wrong side. The crescent stitch has many uses, but is most commonly seen as a decorative finish on a fabric edge. Place a fabric stabilizer under the edge of the fabric. Set the stitch length for the look you want, then sew. When finished, remove the stabilizer according to the manufacturer's instructions, then use a fine point scissor to trim away excess fabric.